Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Institute for Australian Chinese Arts and Culture at Western Sydney University. My name is Jing Han. I'm the director of this institute. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Darug people of the Darug Nation and acknowledge their ancestors who have been the traditional owners of the land for thousands of years. And we'd like to pay the respect to First Nations elders past, present, and emerging. Welcome to the Role of Art, the pokies-free machine. One of the key functions of this institute to present art exhibitions that have an aspirational and thought-provoking value to our students and staff on campus, as well as general public. For this current one, individual and universal, the world we share. This exhibition has a particular role in bringing attention to the deep-seated societal, ethical, and human issue, poker machine gambling. We are thrilled to have received so many visitations to this show, and one of the three artists, Nelson Nghe, commissioned installation of the house you have already seen. I bet you has attracted so much attention. Every day we have students pouring to have a look. This week is intra-session break, so you don't see students. Otherwise, you do see them passing by and get into the gallery to look at the house, especially. And this installation prompted us to hold this exhibition-related event. And I'm so pleased that and then found so many inspiring presenters, who I will introduce one by one shortly. Firstly, we are greatly honored by the wonderful support from Reverend Tim Costello, AO. Reverend Tim Costello is one of Australia's most respected community leaders and a sought-after voice on social issues, leadership, and ethics. He was Chief Executive of World Vision Australia for 16 years, and he is the the Chair of the Community Council for Australia currently, among many other important roles he is holding. In 1997, Tim was named as one of Australia's 100 national living treasures. In 2005, he was made an officer of the Order of Australia, AO. Tim is a spokesperson for the Alliance for Gambling Reform, which campaigns for law reform to prevent harm from poker machine gambling. He has especially sent us a recorded message to open today's event.
Congratulations to you, Nelson Nghe, for this magnificent creative exhibition. Congratulations also to the Institute of Australian and Chinese Arts and Culture of Western Sydney University for hosting it. I have long known that the belly of the beast when it comes to damage from gambling, from poker machines, is Western Sydney. Australia not only has the greatest losses from pokies in the world on a per capita basis, we have 75% of all the world's pokies in pubs and clubs. And where is that doing the most damage? Western Sydney. Where is the infestation of most pokies in its densest population? Western Sydney. So Nelson, a magnificent exhibition in your community, which needs this exhibition of creative houses with I Bet You on them to bring home the devastation. These machines are predatory. They're built for addiction. And that is why in Chinese these machines are called tiger machines. They're savage, they're predatory. Thank you, Nelson Nghe, for what you're doing and for this exhibition.
Thank you, Nelson, and thank you, Team Reverend Costello AO, for this great support. Now, let me introduce Nelson. Nelson is a Western Sydney-based artist engaging with a diverse range of mediums, including painting, photo media, and assemblage. Nelson's practice is characterized by the passionate use of a mixed media and playful abstractions to push boundaries and highlight intersectional narrative as a first generation of Australian Chinese growing up queer within a culturally, linguistically diverse background in Western Sydney. Nelson is a recipient of IAC, which is this institute's inaugural Chi Fellowship. And the new work he created invites the viewer to contemplate the lived experiences of gambling as a family member, whereby houses have been gambled away, whilst most of us dream of owning a home as a part of Australian dream. So please welcome our first speaker, Nelson Nghe, to give his presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Could I please get a raise of hands if you have ever gambled? Thank you. And how about if you know someone who has gambled? Thank you. And if you know someone who has experienced gambling harm? Thank you. Now, what if I told you that all your hands should have been up? Because for every person who is experiencing gambling harm, there are an estimated 7 others who are also impacted by that harm, and I am one of those people. My name is Nelson. I'm a Western Sydney-based artist, and I have lived experience of gambling harm as an affected other. First and foremost, thank you all for being here today, especially those who have come further afield. Words cannot describe how grateful I am to honor this very special moment with family, friends, and fellow advocates. To share the stage with and be surrounded by such inspiring allies gives me strength and hope. Let me take you back to my childhood, where it all began. I have experienced gambling harm as an affected other since the day I was born. I competed with poker machines for almost everything, as it seemed to be the favorite, and it got away with most things, in fact, almost everything. This was a long suffering in silence because gambling harm is largely invisible. Whilst I was sheltered and fed, the psychological and emotional impacts from the gambling harm were not things that a child could comprehend, let alone try and address. And I acknowledge that it will take a lifetime to come to terms with. This chronic and debilitating struggle was further complicated by the shame and stigma around gambling harm, particularly amongst migrant and refugee families, whom are stressed enough as it is. There is little research on the effects of gambling harm experienced by children as an affected other. And if anyone is recruiting, please sign me up. For a long time, my emotions and energy were directed to the ones targeted by the poker machines. It wasn't until I started to understand that this was no accident that things started to shift. How convenient it was that all the focus and responsibility was placed on the people targeted by gambling. Why was my world in a constant state of fear, worry, and insecurity, while the local club seemed to prosper more and more each day and was making over $50 million a year in profits alone from their poker machine players? When it came to addressing gambling harm, why was it only up to the person experiencing gambling harm? Where was the responsibility of the gambling industry? Now let's fast forward to my adult years. Do you all remember a thing called COVID and lockdowns? Well, can I say it was one of the best times of my life? And I'm not kidding. Do you know why? Because for a brief moment, poker machines and gambling venues ceased to exist. And that made a world of difference to me and those around me. The other thing that came out of this was that I discovered the transformative power of art. Art gave me the means to express my lived experience of gambling harm as an affected other in ways that words could not. It allowed me to turn what once was a source of sadness into a profound source of strength. Through art, I could amplify my once silenced voice to shine a light on a serious public health issue. My art evolved from a personal expression to, more importantly, a tool for social change. It is because of this that I stand before you today and share my story. And on behalf of everyone with lived experience of gambling harm, I would like to thank Professor Jing Han and her incredible team for allowing our voices to be heard. We are done with being invisible, and it is more than clear that this public health issue needs urgent attention from the government and public. To share a quote from Drew's incredible book, poker machines are highly complex devices. They're components designed by mathematicians, musicians, animators, and ergonomic experts. Now, as I look around the room, I see my own team of experts and advocates, whom I offer my part in continuing the conversation of gambling harm, so that we break the silence, challenge the shame and stigma, and ensure that no more children or adults experience gambling harm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nelson, for this very powerful speech and for your bravery of sharing your story with all of us. We will have more coming up, and then we also have conversations. So we'll hear more from Nelson. Our next speaker is a writer and a journalist, Drew Rooke. Drew's work has been widely published, including in Guardian Australia, Griffiths Review, The Monthly, and the Saturday's paper. He is the author of this One Last Spin, The Power and Peril of the Pokies, and also another book, A Witness of Fact, The Peculiar Case of a Chief of Forensic Pathologist Colin Manock. And that book was shortlisted for the 2022 Ned Kelly Award for Best True Crime. This book, One Last Spin, is described as masterfully researched and skillfully written, and I can't agree with it more. It is a poignant and compassionate work of literary journalism. Please welcome Drew Rooke to give his presentation.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are on unceded Darug lands and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land and extend that respect to any First Nations people who are present here today. Thank you so much, Nelson, for that presentation. It takes a lot of courage to get up here and share your very, very personal lived experience. And I've heard many, many stories similar to that in the course of researching this book. And I think that it is important that those stories are heard more and more. So thank you for that. And also thank you for inviting me here today. It is an honor to share this lectern with so many wonderful advocates. So it's been more than 6 years since my book was published, and a lot has changed in that time in my life and the world. Unfortunately, not as much change as I would like to see has happened in the gambling industry, particularly in Australia. There are still people being harmed by gambling in communities across the country, especially here in Western Sydney. The industry is still making millions and millions of dollars from that harm. They are still designing machines that are, as Tim Costello said, meant to addict people. And there are still communities and groups showing up in spaces like this to push the case for reform. And that is hugely, hugely important, because just as poker machines themselves exist in communities, we as communities need to get together to push back against that infiltration. I spent nearly 3 years researching One Last Spin and interviewed more than 70 public health experts, academics, neuroscientists, psychologists, industry members, people who design poker machines, and people with lived experience. And the reason that I spent such a huge chunk of my life investigating this topic is because I grew up, like many of us do, with an attitude that gambling and poker machines in particular were just normal, and it was a normal thing to go to your local pub and to have dinner, have a catch up with friends, and then go and have a slap on the pokies in the back room, and everyone would make a joke about it. And as I got older, I started to, I guess, interrogate that, as I started to interact with people from other parts of the world who came to me saying, this is pretty weird, what's going on here? And so those questions started to arise in my head, and I met a few people who had lived experience of gambling harm, and also discovered that in my own family, there was a man very, very close to me who was also in the grips of poker machine addiction, and that was my grandfather, who lived in regional Australia in a small town called Grafton, and grieving the loss of his wife of 60 years, my grandmother, bless them both. He started to spend more and more time in the local club at Grafton, which offered primarily one activity, and that primarily one entertainment activity, and that was gambling and poker machines. And he would spend hours and hours there. I would chat with him on the phone, and he would often be at the club, and would or lie that he was at the club, and I could kind of hear the machines in the background. And of course, the machines themselves were designed to keep him there. They were designed to maximize the time that he spent on the machines and maximize the amount of money that he was putting into those machines. And in industry parlance, they call that time on device. And everything in the machines is geared towards that. As Nelson pointed out, there are huge creative teams that are involved in the manufacture and design of these products, and they excitedly explained to me that their goal is to keep people playing for as long as possible. I saw that kind of avaricious attitude unfiltered, in particular in Macau. I traveled there to go to one of the biggest gambling conferences in the world, which is when all of the companies get together and showcase their fantastic new products and the new technologies that are coming onto the market. And people there, you know, would be talking to me as if I was a buyer coming in, and I was hearing very unfiltered kind of how they advertise their product and how this is a really new exciting thing, and you would just put one of these on the door in order to get people in, and then there'd be, you know, this other type of machine that would be elsewhere in the club that was more geared towards that kind of regular play, but that machine at the front was just kind of this flashy kind of light that would draw you in. And as I said, I mean, I didn't hide the fact that I was a journalist once I got into conversation with them, but they were in a safe space, right? And they openly expressed that to me, and I found that quite shocking. And I'm very glad that I traveled to Macau in order to kind of get the unfiltered version of what is happening inside of the industry. And I should point out that the only reason that I did go to Macau was because I was banned from going to the equivalent conference in Sydney, which points out how, you know, closed off and kind of, I guess, fearful the industry here is, which is, I think that, and like we all, as people interested in advocacy and reform, can kind of take as a good sign. I mean, the industry is slightly scared of the public pushback. I also just want to point out that, you know, this is taken, poker machines and gambling is taken as a given in Australian society, and it's often argued by the industry that it's this essential element of Australian society, and pubs wouldn't survive, clubs wouldn't survive were it not for poker machines. It is a very, very recent thing that pubs and clubs have turned into mini casinos. Poker machines were, after kind of years of ambiguous legal status, finally legalized in New South Wales in 1956, but that was only in community clubs, which had a kind of much better reputation than these dirty, dingy pubs did back then, and that's why the government agreed to give them a license. And that remained the case for 20 years, that New South Wales clubs were the only places in Australia that operated poker machines, until 1976, when ACT clubs did the same. But it wasn't until the 90s when there was a kind of lantana-like spread of poker machines through communities around the country. And this didn't happen by accident. And I always like to emphasize that. It was a very, very deliberate decision that was made by governments who were increasingly cash strapped, looking for new taxes, new sources of revenue. And at the same time, there was, I guess, a kind of rise in this idea of the sovereign consumer at the heart of kind of neoliberal thinking. And the gambling industry exploited that. They weaponized that. They went to governments and they said, we have this fantastic new product, poker machines, let them in pubs, and the economic woes that you face right now will no longer exist. And governments reluctantly, I should point out, did that. That's not to excuse the fact that they did make that active decision. It's more to point out the reason that they were reluctant was because they knew very, very well that the harm that would follow the introduction of poker machines, but they decided to do it anyway. At the same time as there was this surge in, this spread of poker machines, the gambling industry knew itself that they couldn't follow the path that tobacco had taken, which was to ignore and flatly deny that smoking caused health problems. They saw that strategy just didn't work. And so they took a different tack. And what they did was they decided, in a kind of twist of PR genius, to admit that gambling and poker machines caused harm, but that harm was not the fault of the industry. That harm was the fault of the individual. And the concept that they came up with to run with and market that idea that it was the individual was to blame is one that many people might be familiar with, and it's that of responsible gambling. That phrase is an industry creation. You see how effective that has been. Now governments run with it, and you hear that phrase in communities, in homes, among friends, everywhere, all of the time. It has seeped down from the industry, who now are not, it's not widely known that the industry created this term to absolve themselves of any blame and responsibility. And the more that we can shift that blame from the individual and remind the industry themselves that they came up with this concept, and they also came up with this product that has grown in intensity, grown in addictiveness over the last 20 years, the better off we'll be. I think, I'm so heartened to see an exhibition like this that's very, very local, that's embedded in the local community. I, as many journalists and non-journalists can be quite cynical about, the opportunities and kind of prospect for meaningful change, and my cynicism is pleasantly attacked and kind of wound or kind of beaten down by events like this. So yeah, I mean, just thank you for coming, and yeah, I mean, just maintain this conversation so that, you know, we can challenge this normalization of gambling, because I think that's one of the major reasons why we are in this situation. It is a strategy that the industry and governments who benefit from the social harm that the industry has created do, and we in our own small ways can rebel against that. And with events like this, I think we're doing just that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Drew, for this wonderful talk. And Drew touched a lot about how generally society or people feel about gambling. It's kind of there or not really touching specifically you. So you don't sort of relate in a deep sense. If you read the book and it's very revealing. It tells you a lot. And then you say, oh, I see. No wonder. So it's really a wonderful book, and I enjoyed it so much. And to tell a lot of deep-seated truths that it's not so obvious to people, feel like, oh, there's something there, but not really there. So you're sort of indifferent in many ways. But this is really, really a good book. So I'm so pleased that we can have Drew today to have this conversation. And our next speaker, it's also equally very exciting, knowing a lot of things, having done a lot of things. Dr. George Catsi. George is a National Australian Writers Guild Augie Award-winning performance writer, as well as performer and producer. He is a senior lecturer of teaching Masters of Creative Industries at UTS, facilitating creative, innovative, entrepreneurial outcomes. And then you will find out why. Because George is also Petersham Bowling Club president, who on a community level became involved in saving a failed club. And he led a team that imagined what a club could do by removing poker machines and creating a thriving arts, music, and a community hub. And it became such a huge success. So please welcome Dr. George Catsi to give his presentation.
Exploitation over engagement, cash over community, loss over life. So as Jing described, in 2006, on my street, there was a bowling club, and I tried to engage with them, but they were pretty rude. They weren't interested, but they were in a death spiral. They hadn't kept up with changing demographics, and they went down the next road, which is they wanted to develop the land. And as local community, we engaged with that, and we just went, whoa, hang on a sec. we don't use it, but we think it's good. And we actually pushed back, and we had a 2-year tussle where we felt that they'd lost the right to be custodians of that land. And we became members, and we resisted that, and we spilled the board, and the community took it over. And we took over a failed club. There was no permanent staff. There was decaying greens. The people who were bowlers had left, and it was it was in a very sad state. But we were open, and so we were board members. None of us were bowlers. I'm so not a bowler. I still don't bowl. Crazy. None of us were bowlers. None of us had been on boards. And none of us had really worked in hospitality. Like, I think I had my RSA, you know what I mean? So we really didn't know what we were doing. And I think through failure, you get the opportunity to see things differently. So we just realised we had to trade, and we had to figure it out. We didn't know what to do. So we contacted Clubs New South Wales, because we went, well, they're the peak body. We'll ask them, what do we do? Well, we had to pay $900 to sign up before they'd give us any information. I've got to tell you, the club had literally no money, so we were down to zero. And so we joined, and then they gave us the review of what we should do. And they said, well, the poker machines that you have, they're out of date. No one wants to play them. right? So no one's coming in. So you need to sort of spend about 20,000 to upgrade the poker machines. So you can bring people through. They didn't use the word push, bring people through. And from the profits, you can offer subsidized food and drink. We went, wow, that's the model. That's the model. There it is. That's the nutshell. That's kind of how it works. And we went, so you want us to exploit one part of our community who aren't us, so we have to find them. We have to kind of woo them in so that they can play, so that they can actually lose, so that we can then lower the price of the drink and the food, so that we can all live happily ever after over here, whilst there's this room over here where we're exploitative. And we were very uncomfortable with that, but it took us a while just to figure it out. So we had these machines on. We were petrified when anyone played them, right? 2 reasons. One, we didn't know what we were doing. And secondly, we didn't want anyone to play them. We didn't want them to use them. So we had this very uncomfortable relationship with these things, because we kept being told this is just part of it. This is what clubs are. And we recognise them. As Drew said, you used to go, they're in there, you just see them. It's just ubiquitous with it. But we didn't feel good about that. And we made the decision in April 2007 to switch them off. I mean, we literally switched them off at the wall and vowed never to turn them off. And they'll moved out of there. And what that does, it actually changes your mindset. You have to think differently. So I don't know if you know this, but pokey money is lazy money, right? It's lazy, lazy business. So I'm coming here with the business hat on, right? So that was 2007. It's now, 24, right? I think it's 17 years. I've forgotten my maths. It's a while, right? 17 years later, we have to actually act like every other business in the rest of the country other than clubs and pubs. We actually have to engage with our customers and our community. We have to think about what we can offer for a price that they're willing to pay. What services do they want? How can we bring more people in? How do we market to people who haven't been here before so that they want to come in and really enjoy it and they want to stay and tell their friends and bring their friends? Call me crazy, but isn't that how a business should operate? Word of mouth, good service, great facility, love the vibe, love what you're offering. We realise that that's actually quite a different mindset. So for those clubs that have been sucking on the teat of the gambling industry since 1956 or 55, since the 50s, they don't know what to do. The board is stacked with people who are not capable of actually thinking outside of that. And I think any board member who takes money as part of their board fees then why would they? I've got to say, I've never been paid for my 17 years of service to the bowling club. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that. I see it as a community service, and it's what I do. So you have to think differently. You've got to change the makeup of the boards. You've got to bring people in. You've got to put creatives on the board. You've got to put other entrepreneurial minds onto the board. And you have to reposition poker machines as not part of core business. So it's part of this transitional mindset that needs to happen, which most clubs are afraid to do. In fact, they don't even know how to do it. They've got no idea, because they think they're the smartest people in the room, because look how good we're going. But then you look at, well, show me the books is what I always go, if I can look at the books. And we were talking earlier on, I had one director who contacted me, because we get contacted all the time from clubs or a director of a club or a member of a club saying, we really want to get off poker machines, but there's some Neanderthals on the board, or there's some dinosaurs on the board, and they don't want to do it. So how can you help us? And we go, well, it's quite a big conversation, because it's actually quite a way. You've got to rejig the way you think about how business operates. And I did manage to look at, there was one member that I managed to look at another bowling club, and their turnover was 2.2 million, and only 500,000 was from what I call engagement money. And the other 1.7 was exploitation money. So you can see how challenging it is for the boards to kind of let go of that. They don't understand that. So that's the easy money. The 500's the hard money. Okay, but it's the interesting money. It's actually what you offer. That's the community money. That's actually people in the room other than the pokey room actually enjoying the services that you have to have. That's everybody else, okay? but they don't see that. So I suppose Petersham Bowling Club, we've become over our 17 years, and I love the numbers, right? So I looked at the turnover when we took over in 2006, and I did the numbers the other day. And if you want to take one business metric, if you like, which is just turnover, we've increased turnover 902%. Okay, so that's a great number. And it shows that if you engage, you have to work with boards and you have to work with those who are aligned with wanting to change to start to build their engagement side. And there are a lot of people out there who do want change. They're out there, they're wanting that. There's huge interest. I think I've become the face of pokie-free clubs. Now, I've got to say, for someone who doesn't bowl, and, you know, it's like, I don't know, it's a bit odd, but we've been very loud and proud, the Petersham Bowling Club, about what we do, because we think it's an important conversation to have. What was really interesting was when we removed them, we were loud about it. We went, hey, we got rid of our poker machines, and our business went, pchoom. You could feel it just go, lever up. People started to come from out of area. I'd look at someone and I go, who are you? Because frankly, those days you knew everyone, right? You went, who are you and where are you from? And somebody said, oh, I'm from Castle Hill. I don't know if you know your maths in Sydney, but that's like probably a 3-hour drive to Petersham. But why are you here? Oh, we heard you got rid of poker machines. We want to support you. And I went, wow, okay, that's interesting. We were at the club and we were doing some repairs. This would have been probably 2008 or 9. Channel 7 was interested and they were interviewing you and me about it. And there were some tradies working in the background. And Channel 7 left. And then they just went, oh, we just heard your story. We'd like to become members. And I said, oh, okay, sure. We'll sign up here. And so, you know, we want to be associate members, which is the higher fee. And so they joined. And then I looked, I said, you live in Penrith. And they said, oh, we'll probably never be back. But we just want to support what you do because we think what you do is important. So it's about speaking out as there is an alternative. I've been a big champion of that. There is a lot of interest in the press about it. Every time we just jump, whenever Clubs New South Wales will go, you know, we need to rally against poker because we've got to keep all the community clubs going. We always put a hand up and say, no, there is another way. It's actually an engagement model. And here we are. Yes, you can. We've had so many articles written about us and, you know, Gardening Australia, Costa was there doing it. It was very exciting. You know, Better Homes and Garden. Why are they there? And when they come, the Project did a story. New Zealand interviewed. BBC did a story on us, which is interesting, was coming out. And you know what? Every question, the first question they ask is, how did you do it? So there's the club, but they want to know how you did it. How did you do it? How did you do it without poker machines? As if it's some sort of magic. You know, it's just, what I find odd is that they think it's kind of some juju, you know, it's like, you know, but you go, no, it's just business. It's just straightforward business that every other business in society has to think about is, who are my customers? Who are our members? What service can we offer? How can we ethically responsible to that so we don't exploit them? Because any other business who exploited their customers would go to jail and they'd be shut down, right? Clubs with poker machines should be shut down, you know? And I mean, people go, oh, but if we get rid of the clubs, pokies will fail. Well, maybe, I don't know, but you don't know. You don't know unless you try, right? Unless you try and engage with them. Some of them which are just pokies, you know, like the Grafton one you were talking about, they don't, some they're literally just fronts for, you know, for the machines. Well, what if they go, they go. What service do they offer? Or they transition to something more interesting and they change. So I think that there's interest, there's a hearing and an interest out there from parts of the community. There's an interest from people who are in clubs that want change and they don't know how to do it. And I think we need to be a voice for that. I mean, Petersham Bowling Club's a voice for it, and we're trying to be a louder voice about it, but also giving them the resources to do that so that they go, how do we do that? How do we think differently? And this is the entrepreneurial mind I'm talking about. You've got to think differently. It's a mindset, but it's possible. So I suppose I stand here as the Petersham Possibility Club, or the PBC as we called, and we always say people building community. So, and that's what clubs started as, they're community clubs. and they service a sport, or they serve an interest of sorts. And that's what they're there for, and that's what they need to get back to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. You can see that a word that he often uses is a different mindset. And you can tell because of the way he named things, it's just so powerful. And he said, this isn't exploitative. And then you're using money, exploiting this group, and then to subsidize that group. That's unethical. And then he calls business, poker machine business, lazy business. Yeah, you sit there not thinking. It just, I found this naming, it's so powerful. And then the different mindset, and that look at everything in a different light. And then you found a solution. It's really amazing. And George, and we will get more from George and after the presentation. So this is not all. We have 3 fantastic speakers. We're also very fortunate today and honored to have Catherine Simmonds and Paul Fung from the project named 3 Sides of the Coin. And they flew all the way, I call it all the way from Melbourne to attend in person. I really so appreciate that they have this energy and support to us and to this event. The project 3 Sides of the Coin, and if you haven't heard of it, you really need to look it up. It's a fascinating, very interesting, very powerful. The project primarily uses creative workshops where participants can unpack their lived experiences and embody their stories through storytelling performance to help people harmed by gambling who have then become passionate advocates to change, appealing for public health perspective to this community problem. Catherine Simmonds, OAM, is artistic director of this project, The 3 Sides of the Coin. For 3 decades, Catherine has provided people with a creative space in which to discover the need to speak and speak the unspoken. Catherine's focus is the space between the lived experiences of communities and the language of art. Paul Fung is in recovery from a long history of gambling and drug use and shared his experiences through 3 sides of the coin to assist others in understanding the complexities of gambling addiction. Paul has also appeared in ABC production, You Can't Ask That. Highly recommend you watch it. It is still available on ABC iView. Please welcome Catherine and Paul come to do your presentation. And the way you want to sit there or you want to come up. So
Okay,
We'll see. Just put a timer on ourselves. We talk a lot.
Yeah, we sure do. So just really aware that when you invited us to say something, it was like maybe it was important to have an example of something that we've done. And Paul and I have done this work, and just a very, very, very brief snapshot. We've got about 11 of those stories now from different individuals and their stories, and we keep building this. And it originally started through live performance. So that's when Paul first got involved, you know, in the process. And nobody does this because they want to be an actor. It's the last thing. They want to run away. And you can imagine shame. It's the last thing you want to do is stand up and talk about your deepest, darkest secrets and perform. But there's a transformation through the creative, through the connection to self, to others and the community.
I'd just like to thank Jean and Nelson, the connection and the invitation. I mean, when I heard about this, it was like, spoke to Catherine, it was like, we really wanted to be here, because for me, this advocacy in the Asian Chinese community, that's one of my primary purposes, because there's not many people standing up talking about this issue, and we know the huge effects it has in our communities. So thank you for having us. And that was just a brief snapshot of, you know, we did videos and we also did performance. For me, as part of my own recovery, it was daunting, it was challenging, but it was so transformative. And it was part of the process of how I've got to where I've gotten today. Without that, I don't think I would have delved into it as further as I would, because I thought I was okay. My life had stabilized, I'd stopped, and everything was going okay. Then with not the urgings or the pushings, my own curiosity with a bit of guided assistance found further personal development for myself. And that was through the arts. Like Catherine just said, I didn't sign up to perform and do videos. Definitely not. That's probably the last thing that I was thinking, because I was like, well, okay. You know, because for somebody that had gambled for 75% of their life, I had so much suppressed and repressed emotion over that long, long period of time. So speaking it out was lovely, but using the performing arts and really exploring and getting more out, that's what I mean by the transformation. It really delved into, like, just more and more things got unearthed. And that's what was scary, but it was also really healing for me. And to share that with my own family as well, to discuss that, like within the Chinese or Asian communities, you know, therapy is what's wrong with you, right? You only go to therapy if there's something wrong with you. So we went as a family, so we're all wrong, right? So we went and got family counseling and things like that. We did all the things that you're not supposed to do and took on challenges and went, don't worry what the outside sort of looks at us. We're doing this for us. We're really doing that for us. And I can tell you to today and how it is, it's been a massive beneficial. We've opened up our lives in how we speak to one another and how we communicate. We took the hard road. And, you know, I don't advocate for anybody to do what I did to find that family network, but that's the road we took. And that's why I'm more than happy to share that with people, and especially people of the Asian Chinese community and also the whole cold community, because it's, you know, there is that language gap and, you know, migrating communities and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the question of storytelling, sharing, Nelson, you've got, it's manifested in a visual form. Drew, you've written form. And I think in performance, it is very much about the body, and which means it's the emotions. It's not only the information of the story. It's a visceral space. It's so, like I said, it started with live performance, and anybody, you know, if you stand up in front of people, people's hearts are often like this, just to be seen. Yes, just to be looked at. Oh,
Everyone's looking at you.
Yeah. I normally have 3 pairs of glasses on my head. I finally learned about multifocals, but anyway, that's another story. So the thing is, it's that human language of the heart and the emotions. So when you say embodied, and, you know, that's the radical space, or is it the normal space, or is it the way we pass on knowledge? And I think this is the knowledge of, you know, you hear more lived experience, living experience. It's become, thankfully, a more common language now, particularly in Victoria post the Royal Commission into Mental Health and the mandate for lived experience to be part of the workforce and more present in our community. But this is why would you stand up and tell the story? And I think I'm not a therapist, and I've worked with over 30 years, many communities and many stories. But once you say your story matters and I really want to hear what you have to say, there isn't a right and there isn't a wrong. You just get into the business of creating with a story, because you have to distill it. You can't tell a whole story. You have to pick which bits, don't you? And I think in this, it can be visual. So, for example, we have a performance scene live where it's about the pokies, and a whole lot of fake money gets thrown on the floor consistently throughout the performance, and a bag gets thrown down. I remember one performance, a person did not look at the people performing, just looked at that image the whole time, and at the end said, that's my life on the floor. You know, so I think, but I think it's about like what you're saying, Paul, that when you stand up and you're witnessed in your deepest pain and then connected to others and then respected by a public, what has that done for you?
With someone with very low self-esteem, it made my self-worth slowly build up again. Because I go back to like the arts and the value of the arts. The governance obviously never thinks about that, but it's the value and worth that it gave me and it gives others, because we don't have to speak it out. Like, I think one thing that always hits home with me with doing this work was people who say they're not affected by gambling harm because they don't know somebody directly can relate to family, to brother, to something along the lines, which makes it that human connection. When you speak truth and then people can find ways to connect with it, it's like, yes, we are all in this together. Even though I don't have somebody that I know or I don't do this, that's what really made me understand the power of what we did. I thought it was powerful, and then just hearing, you know, people coming up and sharing stories of like, you know, how, you know, just relate. I have a relationship with my mother that's got nothing to do with gambling harm in a way, but I related. And that's when I thought this is more than just under the gambling harm umbrella.
And I think it's about permission. We all know in our own lives, where are the moments in our own lives when you feel like you've got true friends or people you trust? It's generally where you've really shared something, you know, from yourself, isn't it? We have many people in our lives, but like where you can really share your vulnerability, those sort of connections last. So take that on a wider scale of the ability to share, you know, and talking about, like Nelson, as an affected other, we have in three sides of the coin, people who've been affected by gambling, performing with people, collaborating with people who are gambling, and that's been healing in itself. You know, they thought, oh, the things that people have shared, oh, you know, the gamblers thinking they'll want to kill me, and the people who've been affected, you know, thinking that they'll think we're stupid. But it's sort of when you create a space for dialogue. So when you were talking about creating a club where you look at an alternative, I mean, essentially, if you create a space and you build trust and you put creativity in the mix, you use we use our intelligence. There's no right or wrong. You have your experience. You just have to show up. People think, oh, it's about talent. It's not about talent or auditioning. It's everyone has a colour and expression, and it's about creating a space where everybody's valid. And I think that's what this work is about.
To be seen, to be heard, to be believed, and to be acknowledged. Every human being needs that. It doesn't matter what banner you come under, everybody needs that. And then when that happened to me, you know, I was never used to anybody even clapping me, but just saying, well done. Just that built my new bank. I never looked back at my bank. I always say this, bank to me was always taught, look at what your bank balance was. But my self-esteem balance was never looked at. And when that started to rise, the other bank balance didn't mean, well, still got to live, but it didn't have as much meaning in my life as it did previously. So for me, as I think I said in the video, it was the values and beliefs, the big switch in that through my recovery process. And again, just reiterating the value of the arts.
And I think in that, again, coming back to the idea of lived experience, where, you know, you could have an open mic and people could get up and just share, but okay, that it might have its moment. But I think art has a responsibility. When I listen as the key facilitator and director, it's my responsibility to render the work in a way that it's gonna be strong. And it's not like, oh, good on you for sharing your sad story. I could swear that. You know what I mean? Like, forget that. It's absolutely going to the power of a human being's experience and doing what you can with the art to make it speak.
I think that's like myself and other members have always said we're accidental advocates. Like, I didn't set out on a journey going, this is what I'm going to do. I've landed here and I've found that purpose. You know, I've found the purpose of advocacy in creating our own organisation now called Gambling Harm Lived Experience Experts. You know, people with lived and living experience of gambling harm, because there was no organisations out there. And I say it and I reiterate it, I've had conversations today where wheeled out like exhibits, this person has lived experience, but we're not looked at as experts. You have people experts in fields of everything that have so much they bring to the table, but people who have been through either gambling harm, you know, domestic violence, mental health, a lot, you know, it's that wheeling out the exhibit for a presentation, thank you for your time, pat them on the head, but they're not utilised and they're valued enough. So that's what inspired me and the group of us to create an organisation like that. Never could I have imagined when we started out this journey of me being here doing this and creating an organisation, you know, for the advocacy of gambling harm.
And I think just so for those of you who don't know, like as three sides of the coin, we've presented in so many different kinds of contexts. Professional development for mental health workers, for drug and alcohol workers, for the magistrates, for the courts, you know, where gambling related crime is seen more as a behaviour than an addiction. So really bringing the shift. So what we're talking about here in rehab units, in community soup kitchens, in conferences, in all kinds of contexts. We're at, can you believe, the Navy last week? We're in the Navy with the addiction, you know, so just any space in understanding gambling as an addiction, like drug and alcohol. And again, with everything that's been said here today, to lift the stigma off the individual, gamble responsibly at the end of the ad, and to go to the power of the person's experience is the rebellion. That is the resistance, I think, and that's what we're doing. And it's an education. It's about education through what you've lived through and the others have lived through, and the collaboration with people.
That's time.
Yeah.
If you have any more questions, we will be around for a little bit later. So please, if you've got any questions, I'm an open book. So if you want to know more about my story or things like that, please come and approach me. I will tell you everything and anything. Okay, because I want people to know what it's like and how it is. So thank you.
You know, just listening to each of the speakers, it's just so inspiring. I mean, it's a very serious gambling problem and then causes so much harm. Just listening to these speakers, it does give you a lot of hope and to give a lot of inspiration. So it's really, really encouraging. We designed this format is before we actually knew Catherine and Paul would be able to come in person. So originally we planned that they will be doing video presentation. So our next item, not including them in conversation, but when we have the Q&A session, you obviously can ask questions of including Paul and Catherine. So now we are having in conversation with Drew, Nelson, and George. Please welcome them back onto the stage. I have some questions to ask. While I'm asking questions, you can prepare your own questions. So at the end of the conversation, and then we'll just open the floor for the Q&A. So for the three speakers, I ask you a question, but you don't need to look at me. So ask questions on behalf of the public. So you just look at them. So you don't need to turn around. So my first question is to Drew. as I mentioned, that book, I just found it so revealing, and I learned so much by reading that book. And Drew, you have done so much research and investigations, and having published this very insightful, informative, and eye-opening book, One Last Spin. Do you have any conclusive thoughts on why people in general are indifferent to or oblivious to great harm the pokies have actually on people and society?
I don't think that there is a case that anyone can really make for being oblivious to the harm at the point that we find ourselves, where there is so much research, so much media coverage about the harm that gambling and poker machines in particular cause. So, which brings me to the indifference, right? Because that is certainly present among politicians and the public. And I think that the reason that there is a lot of indifference is connected to the kind of the focus on the individual, the kind of pathologizing of gambling, the victim blaming that goes on. And, you know, that then leads to people not focused on how the machines are designed to encourage irresponsible gambling. It's not focused on how the venues like pubs and clubs are designed to further exacerbate the irresponsible gambling through the architecture and the lighting and the smells and the free food and the free drinks. People instead start to think that anyone who loses money to poker machines and to gambling, they brought it on themselves in a way, which fuels that indifferent attitude. And yeah, as I said, the gambling industry has been so effective at pushing that narrative that it's just kind of accepted and taken to be just kind of what it is. And that, but with that sort of attitude, there isn't that sort of like anger that's directed to the industry and to the policymakers who have permitted that harm.
And I have a follow-on question because, as I mentioned, the book is really fascinating. It's in the book, and you done the research and discovered. I'm really intrigued by this very elaborate design, and then this elaborate design involves so much artistic consideration and creativity to the design of the poker machine. So you interviewed so many people, including, designers and manufacturers. Do you know any participating designers who are involved? Did they ever question, or were they ever bothered by the end purpose, which is to maximize users' time on the device? What went through their minds?
For the large part, that people involved in the industry are not bothered by the end harm that the product causes. They see themselves as being, in the words of one manufacturer, in the business of adult entertainment. And they joke about that. They take pride from that. They also, pathologize the gamblers who are using their product, and they say, people joke to me. They said, imagine 100 years ago, you told people that here's a product, it's designed to make you lose, it's designed to make you keep losing, but you're going to play. Like, how stupid is that? I'm quoting from one person who I interviewed. So they are, for the large part, ethically unbothered by it. There was the one person who I met in Macau. I was checking out the new machines at the booth of IGT, which is one of the biggest pokie manufacturers in the world. And there was a fellow there, and we got chatting. He told me that he was a technician. And strangely, we found ourselves talking about kind of Aristotle and kind of Greek philosophy. And I thought this is kind of bizarre and refreshing in that space. And we ended up getting lunch together on his invitation. And that kind of gave me an opportunity to dive as deep as I had gone into the kind of moral world of people who work on the inside. And he explained to me that at first he was kind of greatly troubled by his involvement in the industry. Over time, he said he tried to kind of justify that the kind of ethical issues that he had on the basis that he explained to everyone in his network how the machines worked. People basically didn't listen to him. And so he did what he had been able to do, which was to share the knowledge, and people could do with it how, you know, what they wished. The conversation kind of continued, and then towards the end, he let slip a confession, which was that if he was honest to himself, he shouldn't be working in the industry. And I asked him why, and he said, well, you know, the harm it causes, it's causing, you know, social devastation. And of course, my follow-on question was, well, then why are you still working in the industry? You've been in this for many, many years. And he was just straight up with me and said, you know, I have a family, I have a mortgage, it's good money, and I need to pay for my life. And I just let those words hang in the air because, you know, what do you say with that? I appreciated his honesty. I was angry with him at the same time, but you know, I overall kind of just appreciated that sort of that honesty, and I conveyed that in the book. And you know, that's the thing. These people who are working in the industry are, in many ways, like you and I. They're not, you know, out in their kind of castles. Like, you know, they have families. They're just there. We know them basically. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are people who work in there so involved in their creativity that they lost insight in many ways. So my next question is to Nelson. Nelson is doing kind of doing the opposite. You're also using art, but you know, So my question is, because you're using art to express yourself of your lived experience as harm done to you. So what prompted you to also using artistic creativity in expressing and conveying the harm and the stigma associated with the pokies? And also, like, in other words, what things that you think art can achieve that other practice or activity can't?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I wish I knew too, Jing. But to be honest, there was really nothing else I could do. I think leaning into what Catherine and Paul work with, it's like it almost chose me, in that art is my vocabulary, that's my language to tell my story. And with that, it means I'm in control of this story. So I think, speaking from my lived experience of gambling harms that have affected others, this is the point where I actually have control now of the narrative. I can't change what happened to me up to that point, but I can change what I do with it. And I'm choosing to do a hell of a lot with this. And I mean, it's ironic in that I'll never be short of inspiration now. You know, as much as it's not the ideal inspiration of what I'd love to be, you know, doing in my art, at the same time, I know that it's going to evolve. And also, I think looking at other artists in this space, so Nan Goldin, the American artist and activist, she's got a great documentary called All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. And she really ignited me in that not only is she a renowned artist, but she has gone after the Sackler family in the States, and they were responsible for the opioid crisis. And what she could do and her passion, to quote what she said in the documentary, when you think of the profit of people's pain, you can only be furious. And to draw from what Drew said, I am furious too, and I am now going to use that fury.
Great answer. My next question is to George, and we've heard George's story about saving the failed bowling club in such a creative way. So George, you are a performance writer, performer, producer, and academic, teaching courses of creative industries. How did your creative practice play a role in finding creative solutions to saving this failed bowling club?
Well, I think it actually goes to the heart of kind of where we're both approaching this from. And I'm a huge advocate for creativity as being one of the core building blocks, as one of the intelligences. It always gets forgotten, if you like, or diminished, you know. But you can't be a great scientist unless you're creative. You can't be a great engineer unless you're creative. Unless you're using these creative faculties, these notions of unknownness, if you like. So being creative is stepping into unknownness to find something that you know, so you can call it that. So it's how the world gets built. It's how this room was designed. Somebody made a decision about every single little nut and bolt that went into this room. All creative decisions about what they feel is the aesthetic of right, and it feels right. So it's a harmonic. Yeah, that feels right. So I always sort of talk to my students is go to the places you need to go with your art, right? Don't worry about the market, because you can't control the market, but you can control. So I'm giving you a lecture on creativity, but you can't control the market, but you can control what you do, right? What you do, and then the market will be interested or not, or you go find them. So, which is why I always go to where your thoughts are, go to where your pain is, look at your experiences, because that's a fantastic minefield for how you see the world. And often you feel like you're the only one who would want to hear my story? But you tell that story and you realize there's all these other people out there who either have lived experience or they're quite interested in your story from another angle. So if you bring that into running a bowling club, right? It's kind of this weird tension, but the bowling club is an entrepreneurial exercise. For me, it's been this 17-year kind of research project, unintended, uncredited, you know, like it's just like, I don't know, I don't get any of those university points for it, you know, that you really need. But it's so exciting because everything's an idea. So there's no right or wrong. There's just what works, what feels right. So when you come into it, you go, well, you start to ask questions of, well, who are we? Who are we? Who are in this club? Who are running this place? Who are we? Why are we here? So if we're here, there's probably other people like us who want to be here. So let's maybe just think about bringing more people like us in a bit. Then you start with that to solidify it. And then you think, well, but that's not enough. That's not actually enough to sustain this. I can't just get people like me, and it's not actually, I don't represent the whole of the community, right? I'm just part of it. So there's a story here. So it's literally like writing a song or writing a film or performing or doing an artwork. Business should be like that. I talk to anyone in business. I mean, if you're not thinking in those creative ways about where do you fit? What is it about you that's in this business? Then why are you in it? You know, because it's a long haul and you want to sort of you want to enjoy going to work. So, like I said, I'm a volunteer. I don't actually work for the bowling club, right? I'm just the honorary head. But I mean, I bring that energy into that. And I remember at the very beginning, it was like communication exercise, save the bowling club. The moment it was saved, you could see people going, all right, we've done our work, we've saved it, it's not going to get demolished. And we just went, oh my God, we've got a problem. Now we have to reimagine, rethink to support the bowling club communication exercise, rethinking what is it, who are we, canvassing people around us, what would you like? Trying things, trial and error. It's like writing a song, doing an artwork, trial and error. Is it working? Is it not working? Where do we put our money when we have none? You're limited. So you just go, we can't spend any money. So we've got to find other ways to do things and bring people in. So it's that sense of unknownness. But in that, you start to make better decisions and you start to read it. So you start to read it. It's like your craft as a creative person. You do your craft over time. You start to understand, and you get you don't have to think about the brush stroke. The brush stroke will just naturally go there because you've got a rhythm and a feel about it. So over time, you get that. You have an understanding of it. I'm sure everyone has that for some things in their life. And there's a whole lot of that you don't. You go, I wish I did, but I don't. But there's this inherent knowledge that you have. So you bring that, and we learned that over time. So we got rid of the pokies, and I love it because we're the antidote to, there's no live music anymore. And I did write an opinion piece for the Sydney Morning Herald, which went like ballistic. Like, you do it, you go, I'm just going to write what I think, and you put it out there, and it went ballistic. And I went, oh my God, this is viral. Oh my God, this is like, I never understood it. And the headline was, we threw out the pokies, put in live music, it increased our turnover 750%, right? That's the headline of the opinion piece. Very, crafted, of course. I'm a writer, so I know how to do it, So, but it just was a response to that, is actually saying, this is what you do this, you get this. There's actually a title here. The amount of comments and support that came in on that was like, it just actually blew me away. So it's that sense of the way you think is you just have to kind of try things. So we put the stage where the pokies were. So it's a beautiful metaphor, it's lovely symbolism, and it's there. So we put music, we brought in live music when there was a dying live music scene into Sydney, right? So we do a different model. So everyone goes, wow, how do you make money off the bands? I go, we don't make money off the bands. We make it off the bar. So we never charge any band to play there. If you want to play, it's open access. We're about diversity. So we built a second stage downstairs in a storeroom. And our model is, so this is where creativity feeds the business, because we're a cultural institution now. So we just went, all right, if you want to play here, we don't care if you're really small, you've got no audience, and your first time you've ever played, you can go downstairs. You can charge whatever you want. We will never take your door, any part of your door. The door's yours. But we're not going to, we have a PA system, it's cutting edge, we've got the lights, we've got that. We'll never charge you to use that, okay? We won't take your door, we won't charge you, we take the bar. So you suddenly get young bands coming in who build up over time. Then we get international touring acts coming through. So we get both of them, one will follow the other in this space. So, and then we have live or poetry, we've got life drawing down there, we've got comedies that's moved in, we're so booked out because the culture is there. And then outside there's a wake next to the kids' party, whilst there's, so we've got this diversity. What's that? Yeah, no, we have it all. Next to kids' party. Yeah, totally. But I just think that that's part of, you have to bump into people in your society, to people who are different and doing different things, and that's the sign of a civil society. So I think we're a microcosm of that. But it's culturally driven, community-led sort of thing, and that's kind of the mindset, I suppose, we use.
I mean, listening to George, and you will just agree, convinced of the benefit of having tertiary education, so have a teacher like George teaching you of having such a creative mind.
With that, I have lived experience in that.
Exactly.
I say that I have lived experience, and I've done stuff and I've failed. I've had businesses that have failed. Yes. I've been a creative and it's failed. And I used to be a registered nurse, so there you go. So I did that and I moved on,
Yes, indeed. So talking about the live music, that's my question to Drew, because in the introduction of the book, Drew, you mentioned with their playful looks, poker machines could, to the uninformed eye, be easily mistaken for new age arcade video games. And this observation is echoed in the song, Blow Up the Pokies, which we played at the beginning of the event. In the lyric, it says, flashing lights, it's a real show, by Australia's iconic rock band, the Whitlams. So can you tell us about your interview of Tim Friedman, the lead singer of the band, around his thinking of creation of the song.
Sure. Forewarning, it's a pretty heavy story. So I was familiar with the song Blow Up the Pokies. I was born in 1992. That hit the singles chart in 1997 and was everywhere on the radio, so I was listening to it. I knew, that it was about the Pokies, but I wanted to know what the backstory was of it, so I reached out to Tim Friedman, the lead singer, who just also happened to live up the road from me where I was living at the time. And we met in one of our local pubs, which, like every one of those local pubs, had a back room full of pokies. And he explained to me, kind of in the early 90s, when the Whitlams were just kind of coming up, was around the time that pokies were coming into communities. And then, as time went on, he saw more and more of his friends playing the pokies, and among those friends were his bandmates, or some of his bandmates, Andy Lewis and Stephen Plunder. And he would find himself, doing sound check or waiting to do sound check whilst, his bandmates were kind of off playing the pokies, and he'd have to kind of call them up. And, he became really bothered by that. And then on top of that, seeing stages ripped out of local pubs and replaced by pokies. And so, he started to think about it. And he started to think about writing a song about it. And around the same time, Andy Lewis left the band. And Tim stayed in touch with Andy, learned over time that his gambling problems were getting worse and worse. And that's kind of when his, creativity and desire to write something about this issue that he was witnessing firsthand really took hold, and he banged out Blow Up the Pokies, just like a classic ballad on the piano, and him just kind of going ham on the lyrics. And then that was a hit, led to the Whitlams becoming really, really widely known, national tour, international tour, in fact. And it was whilst they were on a tour in Canada that Tim got a call from a friend in Australia informing him that Andy had taken his own life after a weekend of throwing away his money into the pokies. Andy was a father and had a family that he left behind. So yeah, I mean, that song has become an anthem of the gambling reform movement in this country. As Tim said, like every movement needs an anthem. And despite the backstory of that song, it was something that he was very proud of, to have put out into the public and to have generated the momentum and awareness at the time. And he explained to me that after the song was released, he was being invited to play in these clubs that were full of pokies, and he was troubled by that, but ultimately decided like they were the spaces that this song needed to be heard, like first and foremost. So he kind of took a Trojan horse approach and was all very kind of kindly and friendly going in there, and then would sing this song and kind of be there afterwards for anyone who was wanting to chat. And he said every show, there were people who were there kind of thanking him for it.
We do. Many people thank that song, obviously. And Nelson, and you were actually inspired by the song Blow Up the Pokies. And you can see the artwork is actually Chinese, Blow Up the Pokies. So Nelson, can you tell us how were you inspired about the song, and why did you translate into Chinese?
It was actually all your fault, Drew. I came across that excerpt of your book. So there was a Guardian article, and it was published, your chapter on your interview, and consequently the story of that. And so that was sort of my way in. And from then it sort of developed into my personal mantra, and I kind of just kept thinking, these words really resonated with me. And then the translation bit was also funny because I cannot read Chinese. So thank you, Google Translate. Thank you, family and friends. They're a bit like hieroglyphics to me, ironically. But growing up in Chinese, the word for poker machines was, Lao Fuji, or in my dialect, it's Lao Hoki. And the direct translation is tiger machine. And one day I was asking my mom, why is it called tiger machine? Because the English word had no tiger, had no animal. It was a machine. And she didn't know either. And so then I thought, okay, guess time to do something about this. And it really represented, and I think captured what it did in its predatory nature. It will eat you alive. And it's been called, one-armed bandit, which is, no surprise. So there is that awareness, which, as you touched on, the industry knew what the machines do to humans. And so that sort of was my space to work with. And so in the installation, I also came across historic photos in 1939 of one-armed bandit machines, poker machines, actually being smashed. So we did blow up pokies at one stage, it's another world now. But at one point, all these things were banned and not allowed. So it sort of has come full circle and out of battery. But yeah, that's sort of how it began and ended, at this point. And that's something I'm wanting to take further, sort of this play on language and connotations.
Thank you so much. And actually, George, your opinion piece is actually called, you remember the one, the title is "We Blow Up the Pokies, Brought Back the Music, and Lifted the Turnover 700%. It's a great piece. Yeah, it's really.
We've increased it since then. That's all right. Yeah.
So it's also something to do with the blow up at the.
Yeah, it was playing on the pokies. Then Tim Friedman did do when we were very early in the day.
Yeah.
We needed to upgrade our beer taps, as you do, because that's our sole line of it. Tim Friedman did a fundraising concert for us at the bowling club.
He actually played there.
Yeah.
So yeah, just conscious of the time, and we still want to leave a few questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please put up your hand and we give you the microphone. I'm conscious of the time, so we have so much to talk about. It's really interesting. Anyone has any? Please. Sure.
The address? Yeah. Oh, right. You'd like to come? You want to become a member? It's 77 Brighton Street, Petersham. Brighton Street. So it's interesting because we're actually getting a new roof at the moment. We've waited 17 years to fix the roof. So this is the difference. So I look at some clubs and I go, wow, look at that pergola. Like I would go to places like Camperdown Bowling Club was in trouble and then they got saved. But it's actually Canterbury Helston Park RSL is the money pit for that one. Because we just went, wow, there's a lot of new pergolas. Because we can't, because we're very mindful of every dollar. So we just went, wow, there's like $40,000 worth of pergolas here. Where's this money coming from? So I don't like going to Camperdown because I know it's actually it's a pokey outlying because it's funded through that. So we wait. So you have to be mindful of these satellite clubs that, we're just very nice, but who's in charge? Because these big clubs are voracious and they're taking all these smaller clubs over to help them. and save them. But yes, so we've waited 7 years to fix the roof, you know, but we finally got the money. And we're doing a big fundraiser at the moment because we've got terrible access. It's a stupidly built building on terrible stairs, so we've got it through. So we're now doing a huge fundraiser to get accessibility, but we won't take clubs grants. We won't take any of those grants. We just do it through our own kind of intent. So we're literally about to launch a big fund. It's all approved. We've just got to get the money. So poor access. Well, great, you can get in, but if you want a wheelchair, you can't get in. So it's just, it's a real problem for us because it means we can't have everyone enjoy what we do. So, but thank you.
In primary school.
Yeah.
One day I came up and I was surprised to help students with math. We were teaching them the basic stage of gambling. Like we teach them game by using playing cards, by dice, spinning game. So I went to the head teacher and said, is there any other way? Like you have to gamble? Well,
Wow.
that's not the way, the methods you have to use in teaching them. So I think reforms has to be from early stage, from kids.
Very good.
Children, grandchildren, they will tell you what they teach.
No, totally. And everyone at the moment can tell you the odds. So everything's about odds. You know, you see that in every sport. I mean, it's a huge thing is the whole online gambling and the basically sports betting. So sports betting. I mean, don't be fooled that pokies is it's where the big game is, right? Sports betting is a huge problem, but pokies is a massive, it's the biggest problem. But you can see it, but it even normalizes, it just normalizes it. Everything's got the odds. So you can see how that just feeds in. It just, and kids see that all the time, all those online ads. So I completely agree, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Please thank our speakers, including Catherine and Paul.
I think there was one question, Jing. There was one question up there.
One more question? Okay.
Sorry, before you spoke about children and which about and it's for Nelson. Do you see possibilities for messaging about gambling, being able to use your aunt to reach out to children and young teenagers that you know are being targeted like kids games? That something like gambling?
Definitely, I've thought of children's books in terms of how to work with this subject matter, but in a language they would understand and almost subvert that process. So yeah, please stay tuned. There could be a children's book coming to you soon.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. You know, such a vigorous discussion. Thank you. We're just closing this event. Yeah, you can.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just to close today's event. Please sit back. Please close today's event. We have invited our Western University colleague Tom Nance, who is a policy and a strategy lead at the Centre for Western Sydney at Western Sydney University. Tom is a leading contributor to the Centre's research, partnership and activation platforms, shaping regional narrative and conversation in a way that prioritize equity and opportunity. In particular relevance to today's event, Tom authored the issues paper called Paying the Price, Gambling-Related Harm in Western Sydney. A very informative and insightful report Nelson has read. So please welcome Tom Nance to give the closing remarks.
I had that awkward moment where I forgot how long my bio was, and so I peaked very early and had to stand awkwardly to the side. Look, I want to start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we're on today, the Burra-Madigal clan of the Darug Nation, and acknowledge their resilience, the resilience of the longest enduring culture on this planet. I want to acknowledge the various dignitaries as well. Tim Costello, Nelson, Drew, George, Catherine, Paul, particularly you and your story today as well, and the bravery behind that. And thank you, Professor Jing, for getting me out of bath and shower time with my 3 kids. I do appreciate that. Closing remarks is a tough gig because there's pressure on you to not only tie things up into a nice, neat little bow, but to be incredibly profound while doing it. But it's really hard to be profound when we talk about human suffering, which is what gambling-related harm is. I was stuck on a train today, which was why I was a bit late. And as a man with too much time on his hands, with not enough phone battery to sustain him on the journey, I was looking around the carriage, and what struck me was the man directly in front of me had his Pokie machine app up and running when I was playing. And while I acknowledge there's white hot fury, for me, I'm just tired at this point. Early last year, there was a critical moment in this state's history, a rare sign of political leadership that would have curtailed the harm of electronic gaming across the state. When there was disagreement between the major parties regarding the way forward, for the briefest of moments, blink and you miss it, gambling-related harm was the issue of choice for the media, touted as a potential election decider. But then the election was decided. People moved on, and the harm that continues to be inflicted upon the community by electronic gaming machines was forgotten as we continued to surrender our civic spaces to this epidemic. This is harm that we often walk past, as you said, hiding in plain sight. The faint sound of someone hitting a feature, the flashing lights as the Far East meets the Wild West, and the shuffle of people off a courtesy bus through to the VIP lounge, the only signs of its existence. On the rare occasion that electronic gaming machines are talked about in public discourse, there's a focus on the numbers, which are massive, of course. But when we talk about the numbers alone, we miss the point. In the age of personal responsibility, it becomes a simple equation of someone who's making bad choices, and if they made better choices, they made just a couple of better choices, they wouldn't be broke, they wouldn't be struggling. Having been part of the team that put together the culturally responsive framework to address gambling-related harm in a previous life, I know it isn't that simple. The numbers don't convey the connection people feel when they walk past the sign-in desk at a club and someone remembers their name. The numbers don't convey the hope that the pokies bring, that you might be able to change your stars and your circumstances. And the numbers don't ultimately do justice to the price that our communities are paying to this silent epidemic. Our speakers have demonstrated the work that goes into designing the perfect machine, one that's designed to entice, to enthrall, and ultimately to entrap users. And with a casino on every corner, vulnerable members of the community are being targeted like never before by a predatory industry that hide behind the facade of slick PR and strategic donations. This is why this event and the work that's been showcased today by each of our speakers is so important. It's visceral, it's relatable, it's authentic, and it makes people feel seen. Because this captures what the epidemic truly is, something which extracts not only an economic cost, but a human cost that is paid disproportionately by those on the margins, those doing it the toughest. And this is an epidemic that is truly personal for many. For those who've had to drag their mate out of the VIP room at closing time, for those who've walked through their community club at 10 a.m. and seen people sitting on the machines hoping for a better chance, and for those who've lived with the shame associated with this epidemic. The work that's been showcased today is critical to presenting an alternative narrative, an alternative view, one that's human-centered, that captures the key element that's so often missing from this conversation. It allows us to take it to new and interesting places and to people who never would have thought of the issue before in this way. And ultimately, it allows us to capture hearts and minds, which enables us to advocate for change, which will fundamentally change the outcomes for communities and people we're working with and those that are doing it the toughest. So thanks again for all of our speakers, to all of our contributors, and I look forward to seeing this critical work continue. Thanks, everyone.
I'm so pleased I have from Tom to do the closing remarks. As he said, is the most difficult, challenging part, is giving closing remarks, and a wonderful, wonderful speech. Thank you so much, Tom. Lastly, I just want to thank my fabulous team, Sally Bowman, Yenny Liu, and Lindsay Liu, and our fantastic and volunteer, and she's our PhD student, Hey Jing Ying, because we call her Xiao Cai. So without them, so this event would be very hard to run. Lastly, we invite you to have light refreshments, and also please feel free to mingle and view the exhibition. Thank you so much for your support and for coming. Thank